When your own daughter leaves you die on a snowy highway, something inside you dies too. But what's left learns to hunt. That's the line that's been looping in my head since that Christmas Eve. I remember the red taillights fading into the whiteout, her laughter still echoing from that last argument. It's for your own good, Dad. That's what she said before slamming the door. My own blood, Stephanie, thought she could freeze me into submission, thought I'd crawl back begging. She and that husband of hers, Jeremy, had been planning this for months, selling off everything my wife and I built, turning my legacy into their playground money. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. But that night, standing knee-deep in snow, clutching a half-empty bottle of water, something snapped. The cold didn't scare me anymore. The betrayal did. That's when I promised myself I wouldn't just survive. I'd make them watch their empire crumble piece by piece, while the Christmas lights still blinked in the windows they no longer owned. You see, I'm not the kind of old man who forgets. I'm the kind who writes things down, plans, names, numbers. And as the wind howled across that frozen highway, I wrote the first line of a new chapter, one they'd never see coming. When the truck headlights appeared in the distance, I smiled for the first time in years. My story wasn't ending there. It was just beginning. The road to that night was quieter than I'd expected. Just the hum of the heater and the static from the old AM station playing some tinny holiday tune. Stephanie kept her phone face down on the dashboard like it was a ticking time bomb. Jeremy, as usual, was scrolling through a finance app like a kid with a new toy. "Dad, just sign these," she said, voice syrup sweet. "It's time to modernize." I remember thinking, modernize my life into someone else's wallet. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, smiled in that way that makes your skin crawl, and whispered, "Yeah, we'll liquidate. Move everything next week. Don't worry, we've got it handled." Her thumb stroked the screen like she was petting a prize. I felt the word liquidate bloom in my chest like frost. That's the moment the world turned slow. My hand went to the glove compartment. There, in the dim, under the safety pamphlet and a faded photo of Kristen, was a receipt with the bank's name and a voicemail I'd somehow missed. Jeremy's laugh, her voice saying, "When he's ready, we flip the switch." I didn't yell. Anger isn't always a shout. Sometimes it's a cold, precise click. "You didn't tell me about any of this," I said, measured. She rolled her eyes like she was correcting a stubborn appliance. The car filled with the cheap perfume she always used, and I could taste copper on my tongue, not from fear, but from the sudden clarity of being betrayed by your own blood. Stephanie's face hardened. "This is for your good, Dad. You don't get it." She opened the door. The snow on the shoulder was virgin white, like everything she wanted to bleach away. "Get out," she said, and the wind took her words and made them cruel. I stood there, watching taillights disappear into a snow-glass blur, my breath a little flag in the cold. I could have called. I could have begged. Instead, I did something worse for them. I laughed softly, wiped my hands on my coat, and thumbed my first ride. A big, rumbling pickup pulled over. The driver, a broad-shouldered black man with a cap that read Marcus, leaned out the window. "You need a lift, Pops?" he asked. I looked at Stephanie's discarded phone in my palm, at the photo of Kristen smiling in the December light, and then back at Marcus. "Yeah," I said. "Home." He nodded, and that was the last thing Stephanie expected me to say. Marcus didn't ask many questions. Thank God for that. The man just drove. Steady hands on the wheel, old blues humming low from a radio. Snow slapped the windshield like shards of glass. I sat there, thawing out piece by piece, watching the white blur pass by. He handed me a thermos. "Coffee. Strong," he said. I nodded, and for a moment, the bitterness burned away the cold and the memories. "Family trouble?" he asked, eyes still on the road. I gave a half smile. "You could say that. My daughter just taught me the value of independence." He laughed softly. "Ain't that something?" My old man said independence always costs more than you think. By the time we hit the first gas station, dawn was bruising the horizon, the kind of gray that sits heavy on your chest. I borrowed a payphone, yeah, they still exist, but not to call her. No, I called Edward. Haven't spoken to that man in years, but he always said, if the world ever turns on you, make sure your name's still yours. I left him a message. It's time. We need to talk about the trust. Marcus dropped me near the Greyhound station. He didn't want gas money, just shook my hand like a man who knows a storm when he sees one. You take care, old-timer, he said. I smiled. Oh, I will. The bus ride home felt like a confession booth. People snoring, the hiss of air vents, the low rumble underfoot. I stared at the reflection in the window. A man stripped clean of illusion, wearing lost-like armor. Kristen's picture rested in my palm, edges frayed, her smile still soft. I whispered. They forgot whose name's on the deed. Outside, snow kept falling, but for the first time that night, I wasn't cold. The plan was forming, sharp, simple, silent. And as the bus pulled into Denver, I decided, by next Christmas, they remember what I never forgot. The house was quieter than I remembered. Too clean, too curated. Stephanie had turned my home into something that looked like a showroom, sterile, scentless, no soul left in it. Kristen's piano sat closed, dusted but untouched. I set my old duffel on the floor, took off my gloves, and just stood there, letting the silence settle. You can tell a lot about people by what they erase. There was a new keypad on the back door. Jeremy's doing, no doubt. He'd said it was for security, but I knew better. Control disguises care. I dug out the spare key from under the porch stone. Still there. Funny how people never look for what's right under their nose. Inside, I found their mail piled up, credit card statements, investment notices, invoices with my name still printed at the top. My money, their mess. That's when I started the list. I took out my old notebook, the one Kristen used for Christmas recipes, and flipped to a blank page. On top, I wrote, Dismantling Day 1. Step 1, revoke their access. Step 2, secure the house. Step 3, reclaim my name. I called Edward from the landline, my voice steadier than I felt. We'll meet tomorrow, he said. I'll bring the papers. I hung up and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the neighborhood glowed with those store-bought LED lights, sterile blue, instead of the warm yellow Kristen loved. I opened a drawer and found one of her old ornaments, a small glass angel, wing cracked from a Christmas long ago. I held it up to the light, and it caught a shimmer, fragile but defiant. I smiled. That was her. Fragile, maybe, but never weak. And right there in that quiet house stripped of love, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about rage. It was about balance, about putting things back where they belonged. I turned off the lights, locked the door from the inside, and whispered, Welcome home, Phil. Time to clean house. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of light that doesn't warm a damn thing. I brewed coffee in Kristen's old percolator, the one Stephanie always said was too outdated. The smell filled the kitchen like memory itself. As I waited for Edward to arrive, I opened a cabinet where Kristen used to hide little notes. There was one left, yellow by time. Love doesn't need proof, Phil, just presence. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. I'd need it later. A reminder of what this all was really for. Edward showed up right on time, trench coat still dusted with snow. You look resolute, he said, setting down his briefcase. You ready to make this official? I nodded, ready to make it right. He opened the folder. We'll revoke Stephanie's power of attorney. Then we'll transfer all your assets, the condo, the accounts, the penthouse suite, into a charitable trust under Kristen's name. Haven House still running. Still helping women who need a second chance. I said, that's where it belongs. Edward leaned back, impressed. You sure you want to go nuclear, Phil? Once this is done, there's no going back. I sipped my coffee. She left me to die on a highway, Ed. I'd say we passed the point of no return somewhere between mile marker 62 and her conscience. He just nodded. Then let's light the fuse. We spent the next 2 hours signing, stamping, sealing. Each signature felt like a small exorcism. When it was over, Edward handed me the folder. Congratulations, he said. You just became the ghost in their machine. I smiled, The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Let's see how they handle Christmas without credit. Outside, the snow was falling harder now. I stepped onto the porch, folder under my arm, and for a moment, I could almost hear Kristen's laugh in the wind. The world looked the same, but everything had shifted. And somewhere across town, I knew Stephanie's perfect little world was about to crack. Started with a single frozen credit card swipe. They say revenge tastes best cold, but mine started with a decline. Stephanie was probably in line at that designer boutique she loved. Credit card flashing like a badge. I can picture it. Her fake smile freezing when the cashier said, "Sorry, ma'am, your card's been declined." Then the second one. Then the third. I'd bet she blamed the system, the bank, anyone but herself. Because people like her, they don't believe consequences apply. Meanwhile, I was at the locksmith's. The guy looked barely 20, tapping away on his tablet. "Changing locks," he asked. "Something like that," I said. "Think of it as closing a chapter." He laughed, not knowing how close he was to the truth. By afternoon, every door in my house had a new key, a small, shiny army control. I dropped the old ones into a glass jar, the same one Kristen once used for homemade jam, and sealed it tight. Those keys had opened my home to betrayal. Now, they were just relics. As I was locking up, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then another, and another. 72 missed calls by sundown, all from Stephanie. I imagine her voice on the other end, sharp, desperate, rehearsing apologies that didn't have a pulse. The funny thing about silence, it's louder than yelling. I poured myself a glass of scotch, turned on the old record player, and let Sinatra fill the room. "I did it my way," he sang, and I couldn't help but laugh. The snow outside thickened, blanketing the world in quiet justice. My justice. When the landline rang, I finally picked up, not because I cared, but because I wanted to hear the sound of her panic. "Dad, what's happening? Why can't I access the accounts?" I took a slow sip, let her words hang. "Maybe it's time you learn the value of a clean slate," I said. And then I hung up. Outside, a single cardinal landed on the porch rail, red against all that white. Kristen used to say cardinals were messengers. If that's true, then maybe this one came to deliver a warning for them, because this was just the beginning. The next morning, Denver woke under a sheet of silver frost. My coffee steamed against the window pane as the world outside glimmered like it was pretending to be pure. I knew better. Purity was just a story we told ourselves between sins. The phone rang again, this time Edward. "Phil," he said, tone halfway between amusement and disbelief. "Your daughter just called my office. Twice. She says there's been a mistake. Tell her the paperwork doesn't make mistakes." I replied, "She's coming down tomorrow. Wants a meeting." I stared at Kristen's photo on the mantel, her soft smile beside the reflection of the Christmas lights I'd finally strung again. "Let her come," I said. "It's time she learned what ownership really means." After I hung up, I took a slow walk around the house. Every room held ghosts. The smell of cinnamon from her baking, the faint echo of Kristen's piano. I stopped by her chair, the one Stephanie said she'd donate after the remodel. I ran my hand along the worn armrest. "Looks like we're getting one more Christmas together," I murmured. That afternoon, I drove downtown. Snow had turned to slush, and the city looked tired, like it was holding its breath for the holidays. I stopped outside the old penthouse suite, the one they called their future. A bright red eviction notice hung on the glass doors, the legal seal shining like a scarlet confession. People were stopping to read it. Some recognized the name. I saw the concierge shake his head, pity in his eyes. Public humiliation #1, delivered neatly, like a gift under their glittering tree. I didn't stay to watch her discover it. I didn't need to. Some things are better imagined. On the drive home, I passed a spot on the highway where she'd left me. The snow that was clean again, like nothing ever happened. I pulled over, stepped out, and stood in the wind until my fingers went numb. Then I whispered to the dark road, "You should have left me dead, Stephanie. Would have been kinder." The echo came back like a promise, cold, final, and true. The next day felt like a rerun of an old nightmare, Only this time, I was directing it. Edward's office sat on the 12th floor, glass walls overlooking the frozen city. I arrived early, wearing the same old coat I had on the night she abandoned me. Let her see it. Let it haunt her. Stephanie came in 20 minutes late. Sunglasses on indoors, the kind of arrogance you can't fake. Jeremy trailed behind, jaw tight, trying to look important. "Dad," she began, voice coated in that brittle charm. "This is all a misunderstanding. We can fix it." Edward didn't even look up from the papers. "Everything is perfectly legal, Ms. Turner. Your father simply exercised his right to restructure his estate." Her smile cracked. "Restructure? You mean destroy. We built those accounts together." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You built nothing. You managed what wasn't yours and thought I wouldn't notice the leaks." Jeremy cleared his throat. "Phil, we were just saving me from myself." I cut him off. "You can't save a man you left to die in the snow." The room went silent. Even the city noise outside seemed to freeze. I reached into my coat pocket and laid down a photograph. Kristen, standing in that same snowy pass, decades ago, smiling. "Your mother loved that place," I said quietly. "You turned it into a grave." Stephanie's lip trembled. "Dad, please." "Please what?" "Forget." I asked. "That was the plan, right? Replace grief with greed. Well, congratulations. You're rich in regret now." Edward slid another document across the table. "Final, stamped, sealed. The assets are already transferred," he said. "There's no reversing this." Stephanie stood, trembling. "You can't do this to your own daughter." I met her eyes. "You already did it, sweetheart. I'm just signing the obituary." Public humiliation number 2, formal, witness, permanent. As they stormed out, Jeremy muttered something about lawyers and lawsuits. Edward leaned back, exhaled. "You sure you're ready for the fallout, Phil?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, Ed, the fallout's the whole point." That night, I sat by the fireplace with a glass of scotch and let the quiet stretch. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt reclaimed. Every tick of the grandfather clock was a heartbeat I'd earned back. Outside, snow whispered against the window, steady and soft. Inside, I replayed her face in that office, the crack in her voice, the disbelief. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something purer. Closure, maybe. The next morning, Denver's tabloids got wind of it. "Local investors face legal freeze," the headline read. Their faces polished, perfect, pretending, printed right under it. I didn't have to lift a finger. The story spread itself. Public humiliation number 3, wrapped in ink and irony. By noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, a text, "Dad, please. We have nowhere to go." Followed by a photo. Boxes piled outside, what used to be their penthouse suite. I stared at it for a long time. There was a time that image would have gutted me. Now it just made sense. Actions have gravity. I typed a reply, then erased it. Sometimes silence is the heaviest sentence. Later, I drove to Haven House, the women's shelter Kristen used to volunteer at. The director, Maria, met me at the door. "Mr. Turner," she said, "we didn't expect you." I handed her a small envelope. "Keys to the penthouse suite, tied with a red ribbon." "Merry Christmas," I said. "It's yours now. All of it." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" I nodded. It belonged to someone who believed in second chances. She wanted you to use it well. When I stepped back outside, the air was sharp, clean. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of December pressing down. As I walked toward my car, the church bells from across the street began to ring. Deep, clear, forgiving. And in that sound, I heard Kristen's voice again. "Love doesn't need proof, Phil. Just presence." I smiled. "I'm here," I whispered, "and so is justice." 2 days before Christmas, I woke to the smell of pine and the crackle of firewood. For once, the house didn't echo, it breathed. The storm had passed overnight, leaving the world outside clean, silver, and silent. I poured coffee into Kristen's old mug. the one with the chipped handle, and sat by the window watching the sun creep over the mountains. It hit me then. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with applause. It just shows up when the noise finally dies. Still, part of me wondered if Stephanie had learned anything. So I drove through the city just to see. Downtown looked dressed for Christmas. Carolers on corners, kids dragging sleds through slush. And there, by chance or fate, I saw her, standing outside a diner. Same fur coat, but the shine was gone. Hair unwashed, eyes hollow. Jeremy was pacing beside her, phone glued to his ear, shouting at someone who'd stopped answering. She spotted me through the glass. For a second, the world went still. Then she looked away. Not anger, shame. That's when I knew I'd already won. Revenge wasn't about ruin. It was about recognition, about her seeing herself clearly for the first time. I drove off before she could speak. In the rear-view mirror, she looked smaller than I remembered, like a child lost in a world she built too high to climb down from. Back home, I unpacked the last of Kristen's ornaments. One in particular caught my eye, the cracked glass angel. I hung it on the tree, right in front. It glimmered in the firelight, its flaw catching the glow instead of hiding it. That night, Edward called. "Everything's finalized," he said. "You've done it." I looked at the angel, then at the snow falling outside. "No, Ed," I said quietly. "It's just finally done being undone." And somewhere between the fires pop and the wind sigh, I could swear I heard her voice again. "Merry Christmas, Phil." I smiled. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Christmas Eve. The city glowed like a promise it didn't intend to keep. Lights blinking. Fake snow sprayed on storefronts. Joy sold by the pound. I drove past it all, slow and quiet, heading nowhere in particular, just letting the miles peel back the noise. The radio played Bing Crosby, that same song Kristen used to hum while wrapping gifts. For a second, it almost felt like she was sitting beside me again, whispering directions I couldn't quite hear. Then my phone buzzed. A new number, local. I answered without thinking. "Dad." Her voice was softer than I remembered. No silk, no sugar. Just cracks. "We're at the old cabin," she said. "The one Mom loved. I know you probably hate me, but please, can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. The irony wasn't lost on me, that she'd picked the one place sacred to her mother, the one place she'd turned into a lie, to beg for mercy. "I'll come," I finally said, "but I'm not coming to save you." The drive up the mountain felt like a confession. Snow fell in lazy spirals, headlights carving through the white silence. The closer I got, the more the memories bled through, Kristen's laughter echoing through those trees, the smell of cedar, the warmth of a life that used to mean something. When I pulled up, the cabin was dark except for a single flickering light inside. I stepped out, boots crunching in the snow. The air burned sharp in my lungs, alive, merciless. She opened the door before I could knock. Stephanie looked like she hadn't slept in days. No makeup, no armor. Just her. "Dad," she whispered. I didn't know it would go this far. I stepped past her, eyes scanning the room. Jeremy by the fireplace, silent. Guilty. My gaze landed on a photo of Kristen still hanging by the mantel, dusted with cobwebs. That was the final insult. I turned to them both. "You wanted me here," I said, "so here I am." And then I closed the door behind me. The air inside the cabin was thick, not from heat, but from all the words left unsaid over the years. The wood crackled in the fireplace, throwing orange light across their faces. Jeremy sat stiff in a chair, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. Stephanie stood by the window, arms crossed, every breath a battle between pride and panic. I hung my coat on the same hook Kristen used. "Funny," I said quietly. "This place hasn't changed, except the people in it." "Dad, we made mistakes," she started. "We just thought. You thought I was disposable." I cut in. "That's the word you were looking for." Jeremy shifted forward. "It wasn't like that, Phil. We were trying to protect what you built." I laughed dry, sharp. "You mean inherit it early?" Stephanie's voice cracked. "We just want to make things easier." "Easier for who?" I snapped. "For me to die? Or for you?" to start living off the pieces. Silence. The fire popped, filling the space where love used to live. She turned then, tears cutting through the makeup she tried to hide behind. "I don't know why I did it," she whispered. "I just wanted to be seen." There was the confession beneath the crime. I walked to the table, pulled out the small glass angel eye brought from home, and set it between us. The light from the fire danced through a crack in its wing, painting her face in fractured gold. "Your mother used to say every break tells a story," I said. "This one's about betrayal, but it's also about what survives it." Stephanie reached for it, but I stopped her hand midair. "You don't get to touch it," I said. "Not yet." Jeremy stood abruptly. "So what now, Phil? You punish us forever." I looked at him, calm, steady. "No," I said. "Forever's too kind. I'm going to let the truth do the punishing." And as the wind howled outside, the door rattled once, like the mountain itself was listening. The wind pressed against the cabin walls like it wanted in. Snow hissed through the chimney, each gust colder than the last. I stood there between them, my daughter and the man who thought he could buy legacy on credit, and for the first time, I wasn't angry, just done. I set Kristen's photo frame on the mantel beside the angel. She believed in redemption. I said, "But redemption doesn't come wrapped in excuses." Jeremy scoffed. "You think you're some moral hero, huh? You ruined us." I turned to him slowly. "No, Jeremy, you ruined yourself the moment you thought wealth was love." Stephanie sank into the old couch, hands shaking. "Dad, what do you want from us?" "I already took it," I said. "The only thing left is understanding." I walked to the fireplace and pulled out a small envelope from my coat. The trust papers, notarized and final. I dropped them into flames. They curled, blackening at the edges. Stephanie gasped. "You're burning them?" I nodded. "Because they're not yours to fight over anymore. They belong to something good now. Something clean." She covered her face, crying, really crying, not the polished tears she used at charity galas. It was raw, ugly, human, and for the first time, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who built snowmen with her mother and believed kindness was currency enough. I sighed. "You can start over, Stephanie. Both of you can. But not here, not with my name." Jeremy muttered, "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but regret's lighter than guilt." Outside, the storm broke open, wind screaming like an old wound. I grabbed my coat, paused at the door, and looked back one last time. "You wanted me gone," I said quietly. "Now you have what you wished for." And when I stepped out into the blizzard, the cold didn't bite anymore. It welcomed me, like an old friend who understood the price of survival. The drive down the mountain was slow, deliberate, every turn like peeling off another layer of the past. The storm had calmed, leaving the trees heavy with snow, their branches bowing under the weight. I rolled the window down just enough to let the cold air in. It smelled clean, honest, the kind of air that doesn't lie. Halfway down, I pulled over by the same stretch of highway where it all began, the spot where Stephanie left me to freeze. The road was empty now, silent except for the crunch of snow under my boots. I stood there a long time, staring at the horizon bleeding into dawn. From my coat pocket, I pulled out Kristen's note, the one that said, "Love doesn't need proof, Phil, just presence." I unfolded it, read it one last time, and let it drift into the wind. It didn't feel like letting go. It felt like setting something free. The highway shimmered faintly in the sunrise. I could almost hear the engine door slam again, her voice saying, "It's for your own good." I smiled, not in bitterness, but in understanding. She'd taught me something I never wanted to learn, that even love can rot when watered with greed. I took out the spare key from my pocket, the old house key, the one she thought she controlled. I buried it in the snow beside the guardrail. "You can keep this," I said softly to no one. "I'm done locking myself in." A truck passed by, horn echoing like distant applause. I raised a hand in quiet salute and turned back toward my car. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim or survivor. I felt balanced, like the scales had finally evened out. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the highway was already fading behind me, erased by snow, forgiven by time. But up ahead, the road was clear, and that, I decided, was all the redemption I needed. I reached the city just as the church bells began their Christmas morning chime. The streets were quiet, the kind of peace that only comes after a storm, when everything that needed breaking has already broken. I parked in front of Haven House, the old shelter Kristen had poured her heart into. The lights inside glowed warm through frosted windows. Maria opened the door before I even knocked. "Mr. Turner," she said, smiling like someone who still believed in good endings. "You came back." "I told you I would," I said, handing her a small box. Inside, the last key to the penthouse, polished clean, tied with a ribbon the color of winter sunlight. She hesitated. "Are you sure? This could change a lot of lives." "That's the point," I said. "It already changed mine." We walked through the lobby together, walls freshly painted, the faint hum of laughter from the rooms upstairs. The place was alive in a way money couldn't fake. Maria pointed to a new plaque on the wall, the Kristen Turner Wing, for women finding their way home. My throat tightened. "She like that," I said quietly. "She'd be proud," Maria replied. Outside, kids were building a crooked snowman in the yard. One of them looked up, waved, and yelled, "Merry Christmas, Mr." "Merry Christmas." I called back, voice steady, heart light. As I walked toward the car, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, grayer, yes, but lighter too. Not the man left on a highway, but the man who found his road again. The world felt smaller, cleaner. Even the air had that electric stillness that comes right before dawn breaks wide open. I took one last look at Haven House, the warm light spilling onto the snow, and whispered, "Rest easy, Kristen. It's all back where it belongs." Then I started the engine, knowing there was only one thing left to do: finish the story where it began. I drove back to the mountains before sunset. The sky burned orange over peaks, and the air carried that crisp stillness only winter can keep. The same road that once felt like my grave now felt like a map, every curve, every mile, leading me back to peace. At mile marker 62, I pulled over. The snow was deep again, untouched, pure. I stepped out, the crunch of my boots the only sound. The cold bit at my skin, but I didn't mind. It reminded me I was still alive, more alive than I'd been in years. From the passenger seat, I took the cracked glass angel and Kristen's photo. I knelt in the snow and set them together at the edge of the guardrail. The same place my daughter left me for dead. The sunset caught the angel's fracture, turning it into fire. "She tried to erase you," I whispered, but all she did was bring you back to me. I poured the last of my scotch into the snow, a toast to the woman who taught me that strength doesn't shout, it endures. Behind me, the distant echo of carolers drifted up from the town below. Silent night, holy night. The words hit different now, not about peace, but about closure. I looked down the empty highway one last time. Somewhere, Stephanie was learning to live without what she'd stolen. And maybe, just maybe, she'd remember that love can't be inherited. It has to be earned. I smiled, slow and sure. "Merry Christmas, Kristen," I said. "We're square now." Then I turned back toward the truck, the angel's light fading behind me, and felt the world finally exhale. The snow fell quiet, wrapping everything, the betrayal, the loss, the vengeance, in a perfect, merciful white. And as the engine started, I realized the truth of it all. Sometimes revenge isn't about ending a story. It's about writing the last chapter in your own hand. And finally, closing the book. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.